On October the 2nd, something truly remarkable happened in the sky, an annular solar eclipse visible directly over Easter Island, one of the most remote, mysterious, and spiritually charged places on Earth. But that's not all. The eclipse was exactly conjunct Makemake, the dwarf planet discovered in 2005. And here's where things get weird. Makemake is the creator god of Easter Island's own mythology. And so we saw an eclipse appearing over Easter Island that was perfectly aligned with a celestial body named for its chief deity. The odds of this happening were astronomically small. And as you're going to see in this video, that's not even the only amazing synchronicity around this eclipse. Makemake is a powerful symbol of creation, fertility, and survival in the mythology of Rapa Nui, aka Easter Island. And so we have to ask ourselves, what was the cosmos trying to tell us here? In this episode, we're going to try to answer that question. We're going to explore the incredible synchronicities around this eclipse, the figure of Makemake himself, and the astrology of the dwarf planet that now bears his name. So if that sounds good to you, then please do join me, Dan Waits, on another journey into the past to understand the present and the future. I release an astrological forecast every month, and I have to put my hands up and admit that I said nothing at all about Makemake or Easter Island in my October forecast when I talked about this month's annular solar eclipse. Makemake isn't a factor I've worked with in astrology up to now. I don't usually show it in my charts, and frankly, I had no idea that it was tightly conjunct the eclipse of October the 2nd at 10 degrees of Libra. Now, if you want to forecast the effects of an eclipse, one of the things you do is look at where it'll be visible in the world. And when I looked at the path of this eclipse last month, I saw it passing through southern Chile and Argentina and a big stretch of ocean, and just thought, okay, nothing much to see here. What I totally missed is that the eclipse was passing over a tiny but magical speck of land in the Pacific, Easter Island, or Rapa Nui as it's known to its indigenous inhabitants. Rapa Nui is just 14 miles long by 7 miles wide, and it lies some 1,200 miles from the nearest island of Pitcairn. It's 2,200 miles west of Chile, of which it's legally a part these days. Now, the universe has a funny way of revealing stuff to you that it thinks you need to know. On September the 30th, we saw a conjunction of Mercury and the Sun. The planet's conjunction with the Sun is known in astrology as a cazimi, a word that derives from Arabic meaning as if in the heart. Mercury cazimis tend to be moments of revelation when the answer to a question you've been thinking about suddenly appears. Sometimes it just pops into your head, at others it comes to you through an external source, like a person. And so it was that with Mercury conjunct the Sun, I received a message out of the blue from my friend Stefan Burns, who runs a YouTube channel of his own covering geomagnetic phenomena, astronomy, astrology, metaphysics, and all sorts of interesting stuff. And Stefan asked me to watch a video that he just released. It's this one. I've linked it below, and frankly, it blew my mind. In the video, Stefan breaks down the incredible synchronicities associated with this eclipse. And he was the only person I'm aware of who noticed this stuff, so huge credit and thanks to him for the heads up. Now, here's a look at the position of this eclipse at 10 degrees and 3 minutes of Libra. As I noted in the October forecast, it's pretty close to Mercury, the messenger. But it was even closer to Makemake, which was just 13 arc minutes away from the Sun and Moon at 10 degrees and 16 minutes of Libra. That's a very tight conjunction. So, just to reiterate, we had an eclipse that was not only visible on Easter Island, which is already a pretty rare occurrence, but it was also tightly conjunct the dwarf planet named for the creator god of Easter Island itself, which is just insane. But that's not all. Easter Island was discovered just over 300 years ago on April the 5th, 1722, which was Easter Sunday, and that's how the island got its English name. And guess how long the cycle of Makemake is? Well, it's just over 300 years, 306 years to be precise. Here's where Makemake was at the discovery of Easter Island at 9 degrees and 50 minutes of Libra. That puts it less than a degree from where it was at the October eclipse. So this incredible Makemake eclipse was visible on Easter Island at almost the exact Makemake return of the discovery of the island itself. That's yet another insane synchronicity. And again, credit to Sifan for noticing this. Now, your average astronomer would, of course, put all this down to coincidence. That's boring, and it's not how we roll on this channel. As astrologers, we can't ignore signals like this. This is the equivalent of the cosmos slapping you in the face and demanding that you pay attention to Easter Island and the figure of Makemake himself. So first, let's think about Rapa Nui. You'll likely know it for its enigmatic statues, the moai, the massive stone heads scattered around the island that have captured the imagination of people around the world for centuries now. But Easter Island has also become emblematic of something else: ecological collapse. If you're enjoying this video so far, please do click the like button and let YouTube and me know that. And please do subscribe to the channel for more of this kind of thing if you like what I'm doing here. And do also consider becoming a member of World Astrology Report at www.worldastrologyreport.com. Thank you so much to all of you who've already joined up. You're making all of this possible, and I really appreciate you. Joining up will give you access to an extended version of this very video, in which I will go into full-on speculation mode about what this remarkable eclipse seems to promise for humanity over the coming years. Now, there's a controversy around Easter Island, and it has to do with competing theories about what happened to its native population before Europeans arrived in 1722. The island is famously covered in huge stone statues, but it has very few trees on its surface. And this led outsiders to think that there had to have been a much higher population on Easter Island in the past. And so a theory took shape, which was that the islanders depleted their resources by cutting down trees for building, agriculture, and transporting the massive moai. This in turn led to soil erosion and the loss of food sources. And this ecological collapse in turn triggered internal conflict, social breakdown, and the eventual fall of the leadership. By the time Europeans arrived, the population had drastically declined, and many of the island's iconic statues had been toppled. This view was popularized by scientist and historian Jared Diamond in his book Collapse, in which he presented Rapa Nui as a cautionary tale for humanity. But we've just seen an eclipse over this island, and eclipses are harbingers of great change. Eclipses are moments of cosmic interruption, where the normal order is paused and shadow overtakes light. I've heard them likened to the theatre. The lights go off, the scene is changed, and when the light returns, everything looks different. And so, knowing that we can expect change around Easter Island, I did a search to see if it was in the news recently for any reasons beyond the eclipse itself. And funnily enough, it was. On September the 11th, 2024, a scientific study was published in the journal Nature, entitled "Ancient Rapa Nui Genomes Reveal Resilience and Pre-European Contact with the Americas." And this study received a lot of coverage in the media because it supposedly upends the collapse theory. The researchers studied the genomes of 15 former Easter Islanders. Their analysis suggested that there had never been a steep collapse in the population of Rapa Nui prior to European contact. The researchers claim that the population had actually been increasing in size until the 1860s, at which point slave raiders from Peru forcibly removed a third of the island's population. To be clear, this study isn't the first attack that's been made on the collapse narrative in recent years, but what's significant is its timing. It's coincidental with this very rare eclipse. Now, in my opinion, this story tells us something of how social science is a lot less objective than it likes to think it is. Because for decades, we've seen studies supporting the collapse theory. If you're an environmentalist, it's obviously very appealing because it presents a very simple cautionary tale with a message that fits with your biases. But environmentalism isn't the only ideological game in town these days. There's a more recent trend towards indigenous rights and anti-colonialism. And so all of a sudden, scientific studies are backing a very different picture of what happened on Easter Island. one that points the finger much more at Europeans. Now, it seems to me that the real situation defies simplistic narratives. Few people deny that the indigenous inhabitants of the island did indeed cut down its trees. And the mythology of the people of Rapa Nui itself, which we're going to get into in this video, also gestures towards a theme of ecological disaster. At the same time, Polynesians have been living on small and extremely remote Pacific islands for thousands of years. So it makes sense that they had a pretty good idea of how to live on them without their societies collapsing dramatically and violently. Personally, I think that rather than painting indigenous people as feckless destroyers of their environment or as semi-angelic figures who don't make mistakes, we should see them as complex human beings like everyone else. But what's clear to me as an astrologer is the temporal coincidence of this Makemake eclipse with this challenge to the collapse narrative. That's telling us that change is on the way, for Easter Island itself, certainly, and perhaps also for what it represents in the collective consciousness. The astounding synchronicities around this eclipse and Easter Island's symbolic potency suggest to me that it will have broader significance. The new narrative that seems to be emerging around the island is that rather than collapsing dramatically, the Rapa Nui Islanders were able to gradually adapt themselves to changes to the environment of Easter Island, using clever farming techniques like rock gardening. Could this eclipse be offering us a message of hope around humanity's chance to adapt to environmental change rather than collapse in an orgy of destruction? Well, perhaps if we dig deeper into the figure of Makemake himself, we might get some more clues. In this episode, I'm going to draw heavily on the book The Astrology of Makemake, Uranus's Higher Octave, by Alan Clay and Melissa Billington, which I recommend if you want to bring Makemake into your astrological practice. Alan Clay specializes in the astrology of the recently discovered dwarf planets and runs a school called Dwarf Planet University dedicated to teaching and researching their use in astrology, which you should check out if you find this stuff intriguing. As we've seen, Makemake was the creator god of the people of Rapa Nui. His image is found etched in petroglyphs across the island. He's characteristically depicted with big round eyes and a somewhat phallic-looking nose. And in Rapa Nui myth, he was always accompanied by a companion god named Hawa, with various other companion and assistant gods around him. The theme of teamwork seems to come up over and over again with Makemake, as we're going to see in this video. And there's a myth about Makemake that's very relevant to the theme of ecological collapse. I'm going to shorten it here for time's sake, but you can read it in more detail in Alan Clay's book or online. The myth had it that there were no birds on Easter Island, and the people were bored of the food that they had to eat there. So Makemake and his companion Hawa drove a flock of sooty terns, which is a kind of seabird found in tropical oceans, to the island before leaving again. A few years later, when Makemake and Hawa returned to the island to see how the people were doing, they were puzzled to find that the birds were gone. The islanders had eaten them all. So the gods rounded up another flock of sooty terns and drove them to the island once again. This time, Makemake told the islanders to let the birds lay eggs before they ate them. But while the gods were away, the islanders discovered that the eggs were good to eat too. When Makemake returned, he was horrified to find that the birds and their eggs were once again all gone. He and Hawa despaired at the islanders' stupidity. So Makemake had an idea. This time, the gods drove a flock of sooty terns not to Rapa Nui itself, but to a small islet nearby, Motunui. There, the birds could nest and raise their young, but the remoteness of the islet meant the men could only eat a few birds at a time. And so the myth has it that the islanders were essentially forced by the gods to live sustainably. This myth is clearly about the importance of wise stewardship of the environment and of learning to think carefully about the use of resources so that there's still plenty for future generations. I think it's fair to say that it has lessons that humanity as a whole could probably benefit from. What we also see from the myth is that birds are very important to Makemake and the people of Rapa Nui. Clay and Billington write this: birds symbolize the life of the spirit, along with freedom, expansiveness, and keen vision. So Makemake drives spirit into our lives and opens us to see the bigger picture with a bird's eye view. He gives us the eagle-eyed ability to see the big picture and also zoom in on the detail at the same time. Keep these themes in mind because they're important to understanding Makemake and what this eclipse could be telling us. But there's another cultural factor related to Makemake that's relevant here, and it's called Tangata Manu. It's thought that the Moai were erected to honour important chiefs on Easter Island, but by the time Europeans arrived on Rapa Nui in 1722, the people had long since stopped building them. Instead, this was the era of what's been referred to as the Birdman cult, or to give it its local name, Tangata Manu. Tangata means man, Manu means bird. Tangata Manu centered around an annual ritual, a dangerous competition between men of high status on the island. Before the ritual took place, the identity of the contestants that year would be revealed to the island's priests in dreams. Each of the contestants so chosen would then nominate one or two men of lesser status called hopu who would actually take part in the competition for their clan. When the time came for the ritual to begin, everyone would gather at a ceremonial center called Orongo, which stands by a 300-meter barren cliff face overlooking Motu Nui. Now remember that according to myth, Makemake had driven the sooty terns to Motu Nui to ensure that the people of Rapa Nui didn't eat too many of them. When the competition began, the hopu had to descend the sheer cliffs from Orongo and swim to Motu Nui. It was very dangerous, and many men would die falling from the cliffs, by drowning or even being eaten by sharks. The men would then camp out on the island and await the arrival of the first sooty terns, sometimes for many weeks. And then they would try to collect the very first egg laid on Motu Nui. Once the first egg was collected, the finder would swim back to Rapa Nui. Then he'd have to climb the steep rocky cliff face and present the egg to his patron. The winning patron would be declared Tangata Manu, or Birdman, and his clan would have sole rights to collect that season's eggs on Motu Nui. The Birdman ritual survived until the 1860s, when it was violently suppressed by Christian missionaries. And I think we need to think hard about Birdman right now and what it tells us about Makemake. That's what this incredible eclipse has demanded of us. The ritual has to do with the theme of competition at a time of limited resources. Something else that stands out about the ritual is how it involved teamwork, although not in the way we're used to thinking of it. The patrons of the ritual had status and divine ordination, as he'd been selected in the dreams of the priests. The hopu, the man who actually swam to Motu Nui, had strength, skill, and endurance, and the two formed a team of sorts. To modern sensibilities, you might think this wasn't fair, since the hopu risked his life while the patron stayed on land and won the spoils. But the hopu won honor, and the patron shared his bounty with his clan. Perhaps this is telling us that to thrive in the coming years, we need to form alliances with those who bring different things to the table. Some of us have resources, some of us have skills, but everyone has something unique to contribute. And that would fit with another way of understanding Makemake as the higher octave of Uranus. Alan Clay and Melissa Billington's book on Makemake is subtitled The Higher Octave of Uranus. The idea that planets have higher octaves is a relatively new one in the history of astrology, but perhaps that's just because we didn't have new planets to reckon with before recent centuries. I'm not totally sold on this idea, but I'm also open to it, so I'm going to lay it out here. The word octave evokes music, and it's fitting that astrology borrows from musical terminology here. Astrology has been called the music of the spheres, after all. The idea of octaves was first applied to Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, the first three new planets. Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto are supposedly the higher octaves of Mercury, Venus, and Mars, respectively. This essentially means that they're different expressions of the same fundamental vibrations or energies of the faster planets. For example, where Venus signifies attraction and the impulse to unify, Neptune is ideals, dreams, and fantasies. In other words, it's shared visions that bring people together at a much wider level. Where Mars is action, anger, and violence, Pluto is rage, manipulation, and power struggles. Where Mercury is the planet of the rational mind and its expression through the communicative faculty, Uranus is what awakens us to the unique genius, the unique expression of each individual. Now, according to Clay and Billington, Makemake is the higher octave of Uranus. They say this: If Mercury's ideas and communications are networked into the collective consciousness by Uranus, then Makemake talks about the culture or the nation that is addressed by that network. Makemake gives Uranus's intuitive impulses meaning and context, which transforms our understanding of his unexpected ways. They also suggest that because Uranus, as the sky god, is associated with astrology, Makemake is too. Now, Clay and Billington employ several approaches to understanding Makemake. They also consider the Sabian symbol for the planet. The Sabian symbols are a set of 360 symbolic images or phrases, each corresponding to a specific degree of the zodiac. They were first developed in 1925 by the astrologer Mark Edmund Jones in collaboration with a clairvoyant named Elsie Wheeler, who intuitively described each degree of the zodiac while in a meditative state. Each Sabian symbol is a vivid image or scenario that represents the essential energy, lesson, or archetype of that zodiac degree. At the discovery of Makemake on 31st of March 2005, Makemake was in the 21st degree of Virgo. The Sabian symbol for this degree is a girls' basketball team. Notice how we have similar themes to what we saw in the Birdman ritual here. We have the theme of competition and aggression being channeled into non-violence, and we have the theme of teamwork. But why a girls' basketball team? Well, archetypally speaking, femininity is said to be more receptive to collective forces than masculinity. Perhaps here then we have the suggestion that Makemake asks us to use our intuition in figuring out how we should pool our skills and who we should pool resources with. Now, another way of figuring out what a new planet is concerned with is to look at events and themes in the zeitgeist at the time of its discovery, because the history of astrology shows that there seems to be a correlation between these things. For example, Uranus, planet of freedom and individuality, was discovered in 1781, around the time of the Enlightenment revolutions of the late 18th century, in which the French, the Americans, and the Haitians, among others, made bids for freedom from dominant power structures of the time. Neptune, the planet of collective dreams, was discovered in 1846, around the time of another wave of revolutions across Europe, the publishing of the Communist Manifesto, and the beginning of the spiritualist trend of the 19th century. And Pluto was discovered in 1930, as fascism was taking over Europe, and scientists were unlocking the power hidden at the heart of the atom. Clay and Billington employ this method in their book, and I'll note a couple of their examples here. As we've seen, Makemake was discovered on March the 31st, 2005, and they point out that YouTube was launched very close to that time, on February the 14th of that year. And YouTube is essentially a network in which individuals express and pool their unique perspectives and skills for the benefit of a wider audience. They also note that around the same time, American businessman Steve Fossett made the first solo non-stop circumnavigation of planet Earth in an aircraft. Here it's worth remembering Makemake's association with flight and birds and the bird's eye view. And on a similar theme, Google Earth launched around this time. To quote Clay and Billington, Makemake gives us the ability to take the big satellite view of our reality and drill down anywhere to discover finer and finer detail. Each level holds more information, enabling us to collect and curate this data into a rich understanding. And I'll also add a personal perspective on Makemake here. Like many of you, I'm new to this planet, and when you're first learning how something functions in astrology, the most powerful teaching tools are your own life experiences. And so, how was I awakened to Makemake? Well, my friend Stefan contacted me and said, "Hey, look at this video I've made about Easter Island. Why don't you make one about this too?" And so we networked, and we've each contributed our individual perspectives, expertise, and inspiration to get further on a topic than we could have gotten on our own. What's more, Clay and Billington associate Makemake with YouTube, and yeah, you get it. Astrology can be funny sometimes. So I hope all of this has given you some insight into the eclipse of October the 2nd, including what it might have signified in your life and in the wider world. And perhaps it's got you interested in Makemake as a point to consider in your astrology. But of course, there are some big questions remaining here. This same eclipse season has also brought a massive environmental disaster in the United States, as well as a big escalation in conflict in the Middle East, among other things. What could Makemake and the amazing synchronicities around it be telling us about the big picture and the challenges humanity looks likely to go through in the next few years? Well, I'm more than willing to speculate. And in the extended version of this video, available exclusively for World Astrology Report members, I do just that. If you want to get access to that video, as well as extended versions of all my videos going back to May, then head to www.worldastrologyreport.com and sign up as a member. You also get access to my private forum, the War Room, as well as access to monthly live Q&A sessions. The next one will be taking place on October the 20th, and I hope to see you there. But that's it for this video. Thanks for watching, and see you again very soon.